She whispered, "May I warm up by your fire?" His answer changed everything that night. The night had settled over the small town like a thick, heavy blanket. The streets were empty, and the only sound was the whisper of the cold wind moving between the rows of houses. Snow fell softly, covering the ground in a thin, sparkling layer that made the night feel both magical and lonely at the same time. The woman walked slowly, hugging herself tightly as the chill cut through her coat. She had been out longer than she planned, trying to finish errands and make it back home before the storm worsened. But now her fingers were numb, her cheeks pink from the cold, and every step felt heavier than the last. She had walked this path many times before, yet tonight it felt different. The wind seemed sharper, almost like it was pushing her back, warning her to turn around and go home. But something inside her told her to keep moving forward. Her eyes, searching for a hint of warmth or shelter, caught a small flicker of light in the distance. It was faint at first, barely noticeable against the dark sky, but as she moved closer, she realized it was a fire burning near one of the houses. Smoke curled gently into the night, disappearing into the darkness like a secret being whispered to the stars. She hesitated for a moment. The town was quiet, almost too quiet, and she didn't know the people around here very well. Her mind raced with questions. Should I go closer? Is someone there? Will they help me? The cold gnawed at her patience, and her resolve began to waver. But then the thought of standing alone in the freezing wind, shivering until she could barely move, pushed her forward. She took a deep breath and stepped toward the light. As she approached, she could see a man sitting near the fire. He looked ordinary, quiet, almost invisible in the night, yet there was a calm presence about him. The firelight danced across his face, highlighting the lines of a life that had known hard work and loneliness. He seemed unaware of the world beyond his small circle of warmth, lost in thought as he watched the flames flicker. She stopped a few feet away, unsure of what to say. Her voice felt small, fragile against the night. Finally, she whispered almost to herself, "May I warm up by your fire?" The man looked up slowly. His eyes, dark but gentle, met hers, and for a moment time seemed to freeze. There was no rush, no judgment, only a quiet curiosity. He didn't speak immediately, as if considering whether to trust this stranger who had appeared at such a late hour. Then, with a small nod and a faint smile, he said, "Of course." "Come closer." The words were simple, but they carried warmth deeper than any fire could provide. She stepped closer, her breath visible in the cold air, and felt an unexpected sense of relief. As she moved nearer to the fire, the heat wrapped around her like a soft blanket, melting some of the tension in her body. The man adjusted a log in the fire, sending sparks flying upward, creating tiny stars that disappeared into the night. He offered her a blanket, and she took it gratefully, wrapping it around her shoulders. It smelled faintly of smoke and wood, comforting in its familiarity. She could feel the warmth seep into her fingers, her toes, her very bones, and for the first time that night she felt a little safe. They didn't speak much at first. She sat quietly, watching the fire dance, and he tended to it with a careful, steady rhythm. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a recognition of two people who had both known hardship and now found themselves sharing this simple moment of peace. She noticed the small details about him, the calluses on his hands, the way his eyes softened when he looked at the flames, the quiet strength in his posture. He noticed her hesitation, the way she hugged herself, as if trying to keep the cold away even with the blanket. Without saying a word, he offered her a cup of hot tea, the steam rising and filling the air with a sweet, calming aroma. She took the cup with both hands, savoring the warmth as it traveled through her body. The first sip made her close her eyes in relief. "Thank you," she murmured. He nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You're welcome. It's too cold to be outside alone." The words were simple, but they carried more meaning than she expected. In that moment, she realized that kindness could be found in the quietest gestures, in the smallest acts. As they sat there, the conversation began to flow naturally. She spoke softly about her day, about the errands that had taken longer than expected, about the loneliness that sometimes felt unbearable. He listened attentively, never interrupting, offering only small nods and gentle words of encouragement. Then he shared a little of his own story, how he had moved to this town years ago, how he worked hard to make a living, and how nights like this were often his only quiet moments. There was no boasting, no complaints, only a raw honesty that made her feel like she could trust him. The night wore on, and the storm outside grew stronger. Snow began falling more heavily, covering the ground in a thick white blanket. She could hear it tapping against the windows, a gentle reminder that the world outside was harsh and unforgiving. Yet inside, by the fire, there was a calm serenity. The warmth of the flames, the gentle crackle of the wood, and the soft presence of the man made her forget the cold for a while. She realized that this night, which had started with uncertainty and fear, had become one of the most peaceful experiences she had had in a long time. She looked at him and noticed the quiet kindness in his eyes. There was something about him that felt familiar, even though they had never met before. Maybe it was the honesty in his expression, or the way he didn't judge her for being a stranger at his door. Whatever it was, it made her feel safe enough to let down some of her walls, to share pieces of herself that she rarely showed to anyone. She spoke of small dreams, of hopes she had tucked away, and of the fears that had kept her awake on many nights. He listened without interruption, and she felt a sense of relief she hadn't felt in years. Time seemed to slip away. Hours passed, and neither noticed the cold seeping into the corners of the room, nor the darkness growing outside. They were caught in a world of their own making, a world defined by the fire, the tea, and the quiet companionship. There was laughter too, small and gentle, like the sound of a hidden stream flowing under ice. It wasn't the kind of laughter that filled a room with noise, but the kind that settled deep into the heart, warm and lasting. As midnight approached, she realized that she had been holding her breath without noticing it. The storm had calmed slightly, leaving the night still and silent, with only the soft glow of the fire illuminating the room. She felt an unexpected sadness, knowing that this moment would end, that she would have to return to the cold streets eventually. But before she could speak, he offered a reassuring smile. "You can stay as long as you need," he said simply, and those words felt like a promise, a lifeline in the dark. They sat in silence for a while longer, the fire casting shadows that danced across the walls. She thought about how a simple act, asking if she could warm herself, had led to this night, a night of connection and understanding. She realized that sometimes the smallest decisions could change everything, that reaching out even when afraid could open doors she didn't know existed. She felt gratitude, not only for the warmth of the fire, but for the warmth of a human heart willing to share it. Finally, she stood, stretching her stiff limbs. "I should probably head back soon," she said softly, reluctant to break the spell of the night. He nodded, understanding, but didn't let her leave just yet. "Take this with you," he said, handing her another blanket. "It will help on the walk home." She took it, feeling its warmth and the thought behind it, and smiled genuinely, a smile that had been rare for her lately. As she walked back into the cold, the snow crunching beneath her feet, she felt a strange sense of hope. The night that had started with fear and uncertainty had turned into something magical. A simple question, whispered into the night, had brought her to a place of warmth, kindness, and connection. And she knew, deep in her heart, that she would not forget this night, nor the man who had changed it simply by answering with compassion. She looked back once, seeing the soft glow of the fire behind the window, and felt a small, comforting warmth spread through her chest. It was more than just the fire. It was the feeling of being seen, of being heard, and of being welcomed without judgment. For the first time in a long while, she felt that maybe, just maybe, things could change for the better. And that thought carried her forward, through the cold streets and into the quiet night, where hope, like the fire, flickered softly, promising new beginnings. The next morning, the woman woke up feeling a strange mix of excitement and nervousness. The memory of last night, the warmth of the fire, the calm presence of the man, the quiet trust between them, lingered in her mind. She had walked home through the snow, feeling safer than she had in months, but also aware that life outside the small circle of that fire was still cold and uncertain. Her thoughts kept drifting back to him, to the kindness he had shown, and to the feeling that perhaps she had found someone who understood her without needing explanations. She spent the day trying to focus on her routine, but it was impossible. Every little thing reminded her of the night before, the smell of wood smoke, the quiet rustle of snow outside, even the warmth of her own tea in her hands. She realized she wanted to see him again, not just for the fire, but for the feeling of comfort and safety that had been missing from her life for so long. After much hesitation, she decided to return. She bundled herself in layers, wrapped a scarf tightly around her neck, and stepped out into the crisp, cold air, determined to see if he would still welcome her presence. When she reached the small house, she hesitated at the door. Her heart pounded nervously. Would he remember her? Would he welcome her again, or was last night a one-time kindness? But before she could knock, the door opened, and he was there, smiling softly. "I wasn't sure you'd come back," he said, his voice calm and steady, yet filled with a quiet joy that made her heart lift. She felt a sudden rush of relief, as if the world outside had melted away, leaving only this small, warm space between them. She stepped inside, letting the warmth wrap around her like a soft embrace. The fire was already burning, logs carefully stacked and glowing, filling the room with light and comfort. He handed her a cup of tea just like last night, and she held it in her hands, feeling the warmth seep into her fingers and then into her chest. "Thank you," she whispered, and he nodded as if the simple words needed no elaboration. For a moment they just sat there, sipping their tea and watching the flames, letting the quiet fill the space between them. As the day passed, their conversation deepened. She began to share more about her life. Small details at first, like her favorite foods, the books she liked to read, the quiet places she enjoyed in town. But slowly, she began to open up about the loneliness she had felt for years, about the struggles that seemed to follow her wherever she went. Her voice shook sometimes, but he never interrupted or judged. He simply listened, offering small nods, gentle words, and occasional smiles that made her feel seen. In return, he shared parts of his own life that he rarely spoke of. He told her about the years he had spent working long hours, the nights he had sat alone by a fire, thinking about the life he wished he could have. He spoke about losing people he cared for, about the pain of silence and isolation, and about the small victories that kept him going. There was no bitterness in his words, only honesty and resilience. The woman found herself drawn to him not because of what he had or hadn't done, but because of the way he carried his life, with quiet strength, patience, and a heart willing to trust. Days turned into weeks, and their routine became natural. Every evening she would return, and together they would sit by the fire. Sometimes they spoke at length, sharing dreams and fears. Other times they sat in silence, letting the warmth and the quiet companionship speak for them. She noticed the little things, how he would adjust the fire so it burned just right, how he remembered what she liked to drink, how he left a blanket ready for her without being asked. Those small gestures, simple as they were, became a language of care that spoke louder than words. She began to trust him more with each visit. For the first time in years, she felt like she could be completely herself, without masks, without pretenses. She could laugh freely, speak her mind, and even show her tears without fear of judgment. And he welcomed it all. There was no pressure, no expectation, only acceptance. In his presence, she realized that trust was not about promises or obligations. It was about the quiet assurance that someone would be there for you, no matter what. One evening, as snow fell softly outside, she hesitated before coming in. Something from her past had been lingering in her mind, a memory she had tried to forget. She worried that it would change how he saw her, that it would break the fragile connection they had built. But when she entered the house, he greeted her with the same calm smile, holding out a cup of tea. "Sit by the fire," he said gently. "You've been quiet today. I hope the day treated you kindly." His words were simple, but they carried understanding, and she felt her tension melt away. Sitting by the fire, she finally began to share her worry. She spoke softly at first, unsure of how much to reveal. I have some things I haven't dealt with," she admitted, looking down at her hands. "They may be hard to hear." He reached out, placing a reassuring hand near hers, but not touching her, respecting her space. "You can tell me what you feel ready to share." "I'll listen," he said, his voice steady and calm. That alone gave her courage. Slowly, she spoke of moments from her past, small mistakes, regrets, and challenges she had faced. Her voice trembled sometimes, but he never interrupted, never judged. He simply listened, letting her words fall like snowflakes into the warmth of the room. And as she spoke, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Sharing her story with someone who cared and understood brought a sense of freedom she had never known. It was as if the fire had not only warmed her body, but also her heart and soul. He responded with kindness and patience, offering gentle advice when asked, and quiet encouragement when it was needed. He didn't try to fix her or solve her problems. He simply provided a safe space for her to process them. She realized that this was different from anything she had ever experienced before. Trust and care did not require perfection. It only required presence, attention, and compassion. As the nights passed, their bond grew stronger. They began to laugh together more freely, sharing stories that made them smile. She learned about his favorite memories, small joys that had stayed with him despite the hardships. He learned about hers, about the moments that had shaped her into the person she had become. And with each shared story, the warmth between them grew, not just from the fire, but from the human connection that had begun to blossom. One evening, as she wrapped herself in the blanket he had offered, she realized something remarkable. She no longer feared the cold outside, nor the loneliness that had haunted her for years. The fire was no longer just a source of warmth. It was a symbol of the trust, care, and companionship she had found in him. And she knew that, even if the world outside remained harsh, she had found a place where she belonged, even if just for a little while each day. The man, for his part, noticed the change in her. She smiled more often, spoke more freely, and carried herself with a quiet confidence he had not seen before. He felt a sense of satisfaction, not pride, but a deep, fulfilling joy in knowing that his small acts of kindness had helped someone heal, even in a small way. He, too, began to feel a connection that was more than companionship. There was a comfort in knowing that they could face the long, cold nights together, sharing the warmth of the fire and the comfort of mutual trust. But life, as always, had a way of reminding them that no moment lasts forever. One night, as they sat in comfortable silence, a faint sound reached her ears, the distant footsteps of someone approaching her life from the past. Her heart tightened, and a familiar fear crept in. She looked at him, unsure how to speak about it. He noticed her tension, the way her hands trembled slightly, and reached out, not to stop her, but to let her know he was there. "Whatever it is," he said softly, "we will face it together." Those words, simple as they were, gave her courage to face the uncertainty without running away. For the first time, she realized that trust was not just about sharing happy moments or feeling safe in warmth. It was about facing challenges, fears, and the unknown, knowing that someone would stand by you no matter what. And as she looked into his eyes, she saw the same unspoken promise reflected back at her. They would face whatever came together with patience, understanding, and care. The snow continued to fall outside, but inside there was a warmth that no winter could extinguish. Their connection, built slowly through small acts of kindness, trust, and shared stories, had become something neither of them could ignore. It was quiet, steady, and real, a bond that promised hope and comfort in a world that often felt harsh and lonely. She realized that night, as the fire crackled and the tea steamed in their cups, that she had found more than warmth from the fire. She had found a friend, a companion, and perhaps something even more profound. Someone who could change her life simply by listening, caring, and being present. As she left that night, wrapped in the blanket he had offered, she felt a mixture of gratitude, hope, and a hint of excitement for the days to come. The world outside remained cold, the snow deepened, and the wind howled in the streets. But in her heart, she carried the warmth of a fire that had become a symbol of trust, connection, and a possibility for new beginnings. And as she looked back at the softly glowing window, she knew she would return tomorrow, and the day after, to sit by the fire again, and to let the bond they had begun to form grow stronger with every shared story and every quiet moment. The days after the woman had shared her stories and fears with him were quiet but meaningful. She had begun to feel that, no matter what came her way, she could face it with him by her side. Yet, even as her heart grew lighter with trust, a shadow from her past began to stir. It was a memory she had thought long buried, a person she had once known who had caused her pain, someone who had left a mark that never fully healed. She had pushed it to the back of her mind, focusing instead on the warmth she now found with him. But life has a way of reminding us that the past never truly disappears. One evening, as she walked toward the small house, bundled in her coat and scarf, a sudden anxiety gripped her. She paused on the path, unsure whether to continue. Her heart beat faster and her hands trembled slightly. She thought about last night, about the fire, about the calm strength of the man waiting inside. Yet the fear of what might come caught in her chest. Taking a deep breath, she forced herself to step forward. She reminded herself that she had faced difficult moments before, and this one would not be different, especially if she did not face it alone. When she entered, he greeted her as usual with a soft smile. "Good evening," he said, his calm voice carrying the same warmth that had drawn her in from the cold months ago. She returned the smile, though it was tinged with unease. He noticed the change in her demeanor immediately, the way her shoulders were tense, the way her eyes darted slightly toward the window. Without pressing her, he gestured to the chair by the fire. "Sit. The fire is warm tonight," he said. She nodded, and for a moment she allowed herself to relax in the comfort of his presence. But the unease lingered. She finally spoke, her voice soft and hesitant. "There's something I need to tell you," she said, looking down at her hands, fingers twisting the edge of the blanket. "It's about someone from my past. I'm not sure how to explain it." He listened quietly, his eyes gentle and encouraging. "Take your time. Tell me only when you're ready. I'll listen," he said. His patience gave her the courage to continue, a courage she had not felt in a long time. She spoke slowly, carefully choosing her words, revealing details she had never shared with anyone. She spoke of a betrayal, a moment of deep hurt that had left scars she carried silently. The words were heavy, weighted with old pain, but she continued because she knew he would not judge. As she spoke, the fire crackled and the steam rose from their cups of tea, creating a quiet cocoon that held their world together. The man never interrupted. He only nodded gently, showing her that her words were being heard, that her feelings mattered. As she revealed the final part of her story, she paused, holding her breath, unsure of what his response would be. The room was silent except for the gentle crackle of the fire. He finally spoke, his voice calm and steady, carrying a sense of unwavering support. "Thank you for trusting me with this," he said. "I can't change what happened, but I can promise you this: you're not alone anymore. You have someone who will stand by you." Those words, simple yet powerful, caused her chest to swell with relief. She had feared judgment or rejection, but instead she found acceptance and care. That night, the fire seemed to glow brighter, wrapping them both in warmth that went beyond the physical. The woman realized that trust was not built only on happiness and comfort, but also on vulnerability and honesty. She had risked exposing the rawest parts of herself, and he had not turned away. Instead, he had provided her with strength and reassurance, a silent promise that she could depend on him. And in that moment, the connection between them grew deeper, rooted in truth and understanding. The following days brought new challenges. Her past, which had seemed distant, began to ripple into her present. A message arrived, unexpected and unsettling, from someone she had tried to forget. Fear and anxiety gripped her once again. She felt an impulse to retreat, to protect herself by shutting the door and disappearing into the safety of her solitude. But she paused, remembering the nights by the fire, remembering the calm strength of the man who had welcomed her when she was cold and afraid. Instead of running, she returned to the house. The snow outside was falling heavily, but she walked steadily, blanket and coat wrapped tightly around her. When she entered, he noticed immediately the tension in her eyes, the slight shake in her hands, and the way her breath came in quick, shallow bursts. "It's all right," he said softly, guiding her to a chair by the fire. "You're safe here. Whatever it is, we will face it together." His words carried a reassurance that no storm, inside or outside, could touch. She sat, staring into the fire as if it could provide all the answers. Slowly, she began to speak, first in fragments, then in longer sentences. She told him about the message, about the fear it stirred, and about the memories she had hoped to leave behind. The man listened attentively, never interrupting, never minimizing her feelings. He asked gentle questions only when she invited them, helping her clarify her thoughts and confront the situation without feeling overwhelmed. Hours passed, yet neither seemed to notice the time. Outside, the storm raged, snow piling higher with every passing moment. Inside, there was a quiet stability, a shared focus that grounded her. The firelight reflected in their eyes as she spoke, creating a warm glow that felt like a shield against the harshness of the outside world. She realized that, with him by her side, fear lost much of its power. She no longer felt the urge to run. She could face her past with courage because someone was there to walk beside her. That night, the bond between them deepened in ways she had not anticipated. It was not only trust, but a shared strength that grew with each story told and each fear faced together. She noticed how naturally he adjusted to her presence, offering comfort in small, meaningful ways. A warm cup of tea, a soft blanket, or simply a patient, understanding gaze. His support was quiet but profound, demonstrating that actions often spoke louder than words. As she spoke of the past, he shared parts of his own experiences with challenges and fears, creating a space of mutual understanding. She realized that vulnerability was not a sign of weakness but a bridge to connection. The moments of shared silence, the gentle presence beside the fire, the understanding nods and soft smiles, all of it made her heart feel lighter and her mind more at ease. She no longer felt trapped by the shadows of old memories. Instead, she felt supported, safe, and hopeful. The storm outside eventually began to calm, leaving the world quiet and still under a fresh layer of snow. Inside, the fire burned low but steady, casting shadows that danced gently along the walls. She sat beside him, finally able to relax fully, her hands resting near his, sharing warmth in ways words could not capture. She understood now that the fire had become more than a source of warmth. It had become a symbol of trust, safety, and the quiet power of connection. The days that followed were not without challenges. There were moments of doubt, reminders of her past, and fears that threatened to pull her back into isolation. Yet each time, she found the courage to face them, supported by the calm presence of the man who had welcomed her into his home. Together, they navigated the uncertainty, learning that shared strength could overcome fear, and that trust could grow even in the face of challenges. One evening, after a particularly long day of reflection and small fears, she looked into his eyes and felt a sense of clarity she had never experienced before. She realized that her life had changed because of this simple connection. The warmth she had found by the fire was no longer temporary. It had become a constant source of hope and comfort. She had discovered that, with trust, patience, and understanding, even the coldest nights could feel safe and bright. She smiled softly, a smile full of relief, gratitude, and a budding sense of possibility. The man returned the smile, understanding without words the meaning behind it. In the quiet, with the fire between them and the snow settled outside, they both knew that something profound had begun. A bond built not only on kindness, but on the courage to face fears together. It was a connection that could withstand challenges, a quiet promise that they would not face the storms of life alone. As the night deepened, the woman felt a calm settle in her heart. She realized that her past, though still present, no longer held power over her. She had found a safe space to confront it, and in doing so had discovered the strength to move forward. With him by her side, the warmth of the fire and the quiet understanding they shared, she felt ready to face whatever came next. That night, as she prepared to leave, she paused for a moment by the door, looking back at the fire and at the man who had helped her find courage. She understood that this was no longer just a moment of comfort. It was the beginning of something lasting. She stepped into the snow, wrapped in blankets and the quiet strength she had gained, knowing that tomorrow and every day after she would return. The bond they had formed was unshakable, built on trust, care, and the shared experience of facing fear together. And as she walked home through the snow, the memory of the night stayed with her. The firelight, the quiet presence, the simple but powerful promise that she would not be alone. For the first time in a long time, she felt certain that her life could change for the better, and that trust, patience, and kindness could create something truly extraordinary, even in the face of a past that once threatened to hold her back. The days after the woman faced her past, with the man's support, felt lighter than anything she had experienced in years. The fear that had haunted her for so long no longer ruled her heart. She had discovered that trust was more powerful than loneliness, and that kindness could heal wounds that had seemed permanent. Each evening, as she returned to the small house, the fire welcomed her like an old friend. Its warmth was familiar, comforting, and a reminder that she now had a safe place, not just for her body, but for her heart. She noticed small changes in herself. She laughed more freely, no longer afraid that joy would be stolen from her. She spoke more confidently, knowing that someone was there to listen without judgment. Even her steps felt lighter, as if the burdens of the past had been lifted, replaced with hope and the quiet certainty that she was not alone. The snow outside remained cold and relentless, but inside she carried a fire that could not be extinguished. One evening, as they sat by the fire sipping tea, she felt the need to express her gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you," she said softly, her voice full of emotion. "You've made me feel safe and strong. You've helped me see that the past doesn't have to control me." He smiled gently, shaking his head. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "You did the hard part. You faced what you needed to face. I just stayed by your side." His words, simple as they were, carried the weight of understanding and care, and she felt tears welling in her eyes, not of sadness, but of relief and gratitude. The next weeks were filled with quiet, ordinary moments that felt extraordinary because of the bond they shared. They cooked simple meals together, their laughter filling the small kitchen as they stumbled through unfamiliar recipes. They walked in the snowy streets, sharing stories and dreams, watching as the flakes danced around them like tiny blessings. She noticed that even the smallest gestures, the way he refilled her cup, the way he adjusted the blanket around her shoulders, spoke volumes about the depth of his care. Through these moments, she began to understand something profound. Life's beauty often came in quiet, unexpected ways. It was not in grand gestures or dramatic events, but in the steady presence of someone who cared, in the comfort of a shared fire, and in the gentle assurance that even the coldest nights could be endured together. She realized that she had never truly known peace before, not like this, and it filled her with a quiet, lasting happiness. Yet, even as the days felt lighter, life still had challenges to test them. A minor misunderstanding occurred one afternoon, a moment of miscommunication that sparked anxiety in her. Normally, she would have felt a surge of panic, unsure how to handle conflict. But now she paused, remembering the nights by the fire, the support he had offered, and the way they had faced fear together. Instead of reacting impulsively, she spoke openly about her feelings, and he responded with calm patience. The small conflict was resolved, not through argument, but through communication, understanding, and mutual respect. This moment became a turning point. She realized that the trust and bond they had built were not fragile, they were strong enough to weather challenges. She felt proud of herself for confronting discomfort rather than avoiding it, and grateful for the presence of someone who made it safe to do so. She understood that life would continue to present obstacles, but now she had a companion and a safe place, and that made all the difference. As winter slowly began to ease into the early signs of spring, the woman noticed the world around her changing. Snow melted into gentle streams, trees began to bud, and the sunlight grew warmer and brighter. The changes in nature mirrored the transformation in her own life. She felt ready to embrace new beginnings, to step fully into the warmth and hope that had grown in her heart. And she knew that the man who had welcomed her, listened to her, and helped her face her fears would be there, walking beside her every step of the way. One evening, as they sat together by the fire, she found the courage to speak something she had kept in her heart for a long time. "You've changed my life," she said softly, looking into his eyes. "I never thought I could feel safe or happy again, but you've shown me it's possible." He reached out and took her hand gently, giving a small squeeze. "And you've shown me that even small acts of trust and courage can create something extraordinary," he replied. "I'm grateful for every moment we've shared." In that simple exchange, they both felt a deeper connection, one that went beyond words and gestures. The following days were filled with shared plans, small joys, and a quiet sense of security. They worked together to make the house cozier, stacking firewood, arranging small decorations, and preparing simple meals. Every task, no matter how mundane, felt meaningful because they did it together. The fire became a symbol of their bond, a constant reminder of trust, warmth, and the courage to face challenges. They no longer needed grand expressions of care. The small, steady moments were enough to show how much they valued and supported each other. Then came a day when she felt an unexpected sense of clarity. She realized that her life, once full of fear, uncertainty, and loneliness, had transformed into something she could cherish. She felt hope for the future, a desire to build a life filled with connection, laughter, and warmth. And she knew that this future would not be walked alone. She would continue to face challenges, but with the man by her side, she felt equipped to handle whatever came next. One evening, after a long day, they sat by the fire quietly, the warmth wrapping around them. She leaned slightly closer, feeling a sense of contentment and peace that she had never known before. "I think I'm ready to start a new chapter," she said softly, her voice full of resolve. He looked at her with understanding, nodding gently. "And I'll be here with you," he replied. "Whatever comes, we'll face it together." The firelight danced across their faces, reflecting the bond they had built through trust, patience, and shared experiences. The weeks turned into months, and the bond between them continued to grow stronger. Each day brought new moments of joy, small discoveries about each other, and quiet reassurance that they could depend on one another. The world outside might remain unpredictable, sometimes harsh, but inside the warmth of the fire they found a constant source of hope and comfort. She realized that safety and happiness were not things given by the world. They were built through trust, care, and courage, and she had discovered both in abundance. Eventually, she understood that her life had changed in a way she could never have imagined. The cold nights, the fear of the past, the loneliness, they all seemed like distant memories compared to the warmth she now felt. And the fire that had first welcomed her had grown into something far more profound, a symbol of a life transformed by kindness, trust, and the quiet strength of a companion willing to face the unknown together. One night, as the fire burned brightly and the snow had long melted, she paused to reflect on her journey. She thought about the small decision that had changed everything, the simple question she had whispered into the cold night. "May I warm up by your fire?" That one moment had led to nights of connection, trust, and courage. It had led to shared laughter, facing fears together, and discovering a life filled with hope and warmth. And she realized that her heart, once heavy with fear and solitude, now felt lighter than it had in years. She looked at him, sitting quietly by the fire, and felt gratitude that went beyond words. He had not only offered her warmth on a cold night, he had offered her understanding, patience, and the courage to face her past. He had shown her that human connection could heal, that kindness could change lives, and that trust could create a foundation for a future filled with hope. In that moment, she felt a deep, quiet joy, a certainty that they had found something rare and precious together. As the night drew to a close, she finally spoke the words that had been forming in her heart for weeks. "Thank you for being here," she said softly, her voice steady and filled with emotion. "Thank you for helping me believe in hope again." He smiled warmly, reaching out to squeeze her hand gently. "And thank you for trusting me," he replied. "You've shown me that even small acts of courage can create something extraordinary." They sat together, hands clasped, sharing the quiet warmth of the fire, and in that moment they both understood that their lives had changed forever. From that night onward, the woman carried the lessons she had learned, the power of trust, the importance of patience, and the strength found in companionship. She knew that life would continue to have challenges, but she no longer feared them. With the man by her side, she felt ready to face whatever came, confident that together they could overcome anything. The fire had been the beginning, but their bond was now the true source of warmth, hope, and courage. And so, as winter fully gave way to spring and the world outside bloomed with life, the woman realized that she had not only survived the storms of her past, but had discovered a life filled with connection, safety, and love. She had stepped into a new chapter, one where she no longer walked alone, and where trust, kindness, and courage lit the path forward. The question she had whispered into the cold night, "May I warm up by your fire?" had become the moment that changed her life, the moment that led to hope, and the moment that opened her heart to a brighter, shared future.